So this week I am absolutely delighted to welcome Katrina. Katrina, or Kat, is the Scottish equine sports massage therapist who is behind so much education that we're going to get onto and talk about. But she's really committed to improving the welfare of the horses and the humans within the equestrian industry, and she's doing that through education. So I'm so thrilled that we've both found the time to have a chat because it's been a while. It's lovely to see you. A really big welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's lovely to chat to you again too.
Can you tell us a little bit about your horsey journey? Were you horsey from a young age or did you get into it a bit later?
Yeah, well, I came from a totally non-horsey family. My mum and dad weren't horsey at all, but it was actually my nana who always like would tell me stories about this horse that her dad had called Donald. I think that was probably what sowed the seed for me, and she was definitely instrumental in getting me my first riding lesson. So I kind of had a very standard horsey upbringing at my local riding school. Started riding when I was 7 years old, and then like helped out at the stables every weekend, every evening after school kind of thing, until I started working there when I was about 16. And it was my whole world and it was my whole life, and like all of my friends were there and that sort of thing. And well, the whole time my mum and dad were just like, if you want to buy your own horse, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. And I was like, okay, challenge accepted, off I go. And so in secret, I might add, because once it got to the point that I was actually saving up and earning my own money, my mum and dad were like, "Oh, actually, she's quite serious about this," and they were like, "You're going to go to uni. It's probably not a good idea to get a horse." And I was like, "No, I still want to buy a horse, so don't I?" I saved up money in secret and bought my first horse just before my 18th birthday, and she came from the local riding school that I was at. She called Gypsy, and I managed to keep her a secret for a grand total of 6 weeks until my 18th birthday. When on my 18th birthday, I had an accident at work and broke my leg, and when I was on quite a lot of pain relief in the hospital, I outed myself to my parents and they were like, "A horse."
Oops. So some surprise faces, I'm sure.
But they were all just really happy that I was doing okay because, the relief of me being fine in the hospital, I think outweighed the stress of the fact that I had bought a surprise horse. My mum likened it to me having a teenage pregnancy. So
Oh God.
that's the level of drama that we're talking about.
So when you were working at the riding stables and having your secret horse, did you always know that you wanted to go into horses as a career?
Yeah, like the whole time that I worked there, I was like, I love this, and I can't imagine me working in another kind of environment. But I think the school that I went to like quite a stereotypically rough Scottish high school. Nobody around me at the school knew anything about the horse industry, and when I went and got career support at school, they were kind of like, well, you're not really smart enough to be a vet. Your grades aren't really good enough to do that, and you don't come from a horsey background, so like you probably can't work with horses. So you should probably go and do something else instead. And I was a bit like, but I don't really know what I want to do. And that is one of the things that probably inspired me to go on to do the things that I have since done in my adult life. Um, but that was, yeah, that was kind of my early experience. Like I always knew that I wanted to work in the horse industry, but I just had no idea how I was going to do that or what sort of shape that was going to take. Because although I loved the riding school environment, I knew that there was like sort of more to the world than that, but I didn't know what because I hadn't seen it and nobody that I knew had ever gone beyond that. So it was kind of hard to imagine that future.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I come from a similar background where you just don't know what you don't know, basically. I mean, like you say, in the
Exactly.
riding school, you've got the instructors, and that's about it, really, in terms of professions.
Mhm.
So, how did you decide to train in equine massage? Was that your first horsey job, or? or not?
Yeah, yeah, that was my first sort of after riding school life, that was my first horsey job. So
Yeah.
when I was at university, I went to uni to study psychology in the end because I was really interested in people as well. And I was like, well, if I can't do horses, I may as well do another thing that I'm interested in. So I was studying psychology at uni, and whilst I was at uni, I was working freelance at a livery at my livery yard, and one thing sort of led to another. But I ended up having a horse on loan to me that belonged to another lady that was there. Um, and it's a very long story that I won't go into, but essentially she ended up moving to, or it was in the process of moving to Australia, and she didn't know what to do with this horse. And so I was like, well, I've been looking after her. I'm really quite attached to her at this point. I'll look after her. And I had her for maybe about 6 months. I've been riding her for about 2 years before, and she was what I would at the time have described her as a stereotypical chestnut mare, in that she was quite moody and she has an attitude. But the more time that I spent with her, I was like, "There's something wrong with you." And she eventually started showing symptoms of overt lameness. But now looking back, she was telling me quite a long time before that she was in pain. I just didn't know how to interpret those signals, and I didn't know what to do about it. And we tried really hard to fix her, but ultimately she had multiple problems by the point that we were anywhere close to diagnosing them. And she very sadly had to be put to sleep. And I took that really quite hard because I was like, I felt responsible for that.
Oh,
And I went away and I was like, I want to use what I've learned from you to make a difference now. So
oh
that was what led
yeah,
to me studying massage, because I was like, I've learned so much from you, but I feel
yeah,
like I failed you, and I want to make sure that I don't fail another horse that is in my care again. And so that was how I ended up um, choosing massage as a career, because I was like, we need to do more. We need early intervention. If I had had my hands on her earlier, possibly I could have worked it out. Ultimately, what was wrong with her in hindsight, I don't think I could have fixed, because she had a lot of problems that were a
yeah,
long time in the making. It was just that the point that I got to her, they were starting to show themselves into a way that we could actually do something about them. But if I'd understood better further down the line, we'd had earlier intervention, possibly it could have gone a different way. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. And I think as well, in the last 10, 15 years, or especially in the last 5 years, maybe since COVID and everyone was,
Hmm.
forced into doing something at home and lots of people went online to learn stuff.
Hmm.
I don't think we've had that kind of education either. I
It's
think
it's so true.
we I wouldn't say that we were clueless by any means, but in terms of a comparison, people are learning now so much more about the various conditions that horses can get and the signs, the early signs, and Facebook is fantastic in some ways for pointing out all the symptoms and so on. But I think as well, when you're talking about then there wasn't much to do apart from call a vet, and sometimes they couldn't see anything either. So yeah,
Yeah.
sad, really sad, but probably really common as well at that time.
Yeah.
So um, through your massage, did you find that this was a common occurrence, that you were picking up on things, maybe not necessarily diagnosing, but you knew something was wrong before the owner?
I think when you do massage, you end up being able to spot patterns. And I think a big part of being good at equine massage is pattern recognition, and it's patterns that you find within the horse's body.
Yeah,
And what I think owners want to be able to tell you, or what they want you to be able to tell them, is what that pattern means. And that's not what I can do. All I can say is that, this is what I'm feeling, and this is often related to all of these different conditions. These are the
yeah,
conversations that I would potentially have with your vet now. And what I'm kind of doing is I'm trying to facilitate those conversations between owners and their vets. Obviously, as a paraprofessional, you're not allowed to diagnose anything. Even if you've got a pretty good idea of what it is, you can never say, I think it's that. But you can kind of guide conversations
yeah,
forward to encourage owners to kind of be a bit more critical about what it is that they're seeing. And I do find that people are a bit more switched on than they maybe used to be, because I think in my early days of being in the horse world, there was just so much that was normalized. Like, that's just how they go was such
yeah,
a standard phrase. And that for me, like, it's not good enough. Like, if someone says to me, oh, that's just how they go, I'm like, no, there's a reason. Like, there's always a reason. And it's our responsibility to find that out.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I really do. I think that where you say, oh, well, she is just a grumpy mare, or he's always kicked out, or she's
Hmm.
always left her breakfast, or whatever it might be, it
Hmm.
really warrants further investigation, doesn't it? Because it's not
Yeah.
necessarily normal. So, was there
Mm.
a time for you as you were doing your massage therapy that you thought that horse owners needed to have some kind of resource where they could find out more?
Yeah, because I think one of the biggest challenges is when you're trying to explain something to an owner, as you're in the process of explaining what is sometimes quite a complex situation, you realize that there's quite a few layers of knowledge that they're potentially missing. And if you're trying to say to them, I don't know, you've got a horse that's maybe slightly stiff going one way, and then you start to explain some like ridden exercises that could potentially help with that, and then you start saying like, oh, and so do you know, for example, like how to ask your horse to leg yield, and they sort of get a bit of a vacant look on their face. You realize that that's not my lane. And one of the
Yeah.
biggest challenges is as a paraprofessional, trying to stay in your lane, but also being able to guide owners into the other lanes that they need to be in for their horse. And I think there's nowhere at the moment that you can really kind of point someone to say, oh, if you go and read this, like the the source of that information is definitely going to be 100% trustworthy. Because really what they're going to do is they're going to go on Google, and
Yeah.
anyone can post anything on the internet. And
Yeah.
so and a lot of the stuff that you find posted on the internet is just people's opinion. And so we don't have kind of like a gold standard resource or workflow almost, not to be like too corporate about it, but like
Yeah.
you need to have somewhere that owners can go to trust the education that they're getting is right. Because there's so much chat when you go into livery yards. Like I think on so many livery yards, if you've been on them, like there's always a guru that seems to know everything. And then the more that you get into it, you're like, actually, how much of this information is based on actual education and facts, and how much of this is just what you think you've learned over the last 30 years in the
Mhm.
horse work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's about getting people to be a bit more critical about where they're getting their information from, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Is that then that leads us very nicely into Equine Qualifications UK or EQ UK, which you set up. Is that why you set it up so that people would have a platform to go to?
Yeah, so EQK is a social enterprise which has, in the early days, it was about access to education because for me, I was kind of coming at it from that angle of my youth growing up. It was really, really hard to get into the horse industry if you didn't already have a background in the horse industry. And so what I was trying to do with it was to kind of facilitate young people getting into the industry, and I was working quite closely with like the UCAS outreach like the Widening Access Participation Hub that UCAS has, kind of supporting young people from widening access backgrounds into horsey careers like through that way. That was what we did at the start. As time went on, it grew some arms and legs, and now it is more something that I'm kind of using as a mechanism to try and improve horse and human welfare within the industry by kind of creating a platform where people can go and they can trust the information that they're
Yeah.
getting. And that's what we're kind of in the process of doing just now. We're taking that change of direction, and we're trying to materialize that into something functional that people can actually use. Because I appreciate talking about it. It all sounds very hypothetical, and you're like, that's a really good idea, but how does it work at? And
Yeah.
the how does it work at bit is the bit that we are working on just now.
Yeah, yeah. And we were chatting a little bit about the Lingfield distance learning, which some people might
Mm-hmm.
already have heard of, but they might
Mm-hmm.
not know the background story to it and how you've now got involved, which is really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. How's that come about?
So, Lingfield Equine Distance Learning is, I think, the UK's oldest equine distance learning company. It's been operating for 30 years this year. And it was founded by a lady named Paula Clements, who was basically a riding instructor in the south of England. And she realized that a lot of her clients that she was teaching how to ride didn't have the sort of the horse care and stable management knowledge that they necessarily needed to take better care of their horses. So she started Lingfield by kind of bringing people into her living room and teaching them how to look after their horses. And this was in like the sort of the late 90s. And then as the internet materialized, she started running Lingfield correspondence, and she did sort of like old school packages of information she would post out to people. People would write answers back to her, and then she'd mark their work and send it back to them with like the next study pack.
Yeah.
And that was how she ran it in like sort of the early 2000s. And then obviously sort of by the 2020s, it was all online and kind of running like off of Google Sheets and stuff like that. So it all got a wee bit more high tech. And she developed it over the years because there was sort of the basic stable management courses, but she had specialist courses in like equine psychology and nutrition and like how to become like a yard manager. Like she had a whole raft of things that she did. And as we got into the sort of the 2020s, Paula started to struggle with her health, and I met Paula in 2024 on LinkedIn of all places. And she was interested in stuff that I was doing with EQUK, and she was just like, "This is something industry really, really needs because I've seen these problems for a really long time, and the young people that I've worked with Lingfield over the years. So it's really good to see someone that is trying to solve this problem that the industry has." Um, Specifically, we spoke about issues around sort of access to like apprenticeships and young people trying to find college courses and just not knowing the best way into the industry. And she'd spent a lot of her life advising young people that had kind of done her courses that wanted to work with horses but didn't quite know where to go. She realized how confusing an industry it was to break into. And so she'd spent a lot of time advising these people. And so she was like, it's good to see this getting all formalized. Um, and then in early 2025, she very sadly passed away. And Lingfield was her life's work that her family were really keen to protect.
Mm.
And so, what her family decided to do was they decided to donate all of the intellectual property of Lingfield to EQUK. And because EQUK was set up as a community interest company, as operating as a non-profit, we've basically made a commitment to Paula's family that the information of Lingfield will only ever be used for the purposes of sort of improving equine and human welfare within the industry without turning a profit from it. It is always going to be rooted in doing this for the right reasons. Nobody's trying to make money off of this. We're doing this
Yeah.
because we care about this, and that is fundamentally at the core of the mission that we have. So much of the work that I've done for the last year has been around sort of getting Lingfield back up and running. And a big part of that I've done actually working quite closely with the Association of British Riding Schools, which is a nice like full circle moment for me. I'm really, really passionate about improving riding school horse welfare, also sort of access that very grassroots part of the industry. So
Yeah.
that's the work that I'm kind of doing at the moment is with Lingfield, and it's with the Association of British Riding Schools. We're trying to educate that next generation of young people coming into the industry about and having a more sort of welfare centered approach to everything that they do.
Yeah, I mean that's phenomenal because Lingfield, I do sort of remember it as that correspondence course. I never did any of the courses, but yeah, I mean, can you imagine the amount of work that took for Paula to do to write these things and send them out and mark them by hand and put comments on. It's just phenomenal. So what a fabulous legacy that you've been able to take it on. And I know it's kind of going to grow, and we'll talk about that in just a second about the growth and the things that you've got in the pipeline. But can you tell us, why do you think that education is the key to overcoming the challenges that exist in the equestrian industry? Why is education at the forefront?
I think for me, if you look at any other aspect of life, it always comes down to people either not having the knowledge or not having the information or not knowing how to communicate their problems effectively.
Mm.
that is the root of so many problems that we see within the world, whether that is within different animal industries or whether that's in politics or whether, that's in like personal relationships. I think education or the lack thereof is responsible for so many problems that we see in the world. And I think in particular within the horse industry, we've got a very, very traditional industry that is rooted in, this is how we've always done things around here. But why do we do things around here like this? Why have we always done it like that? And it's because nobody necessarily has kind of stepped in and tried to reimagine that we're doing it differently. And today in particular, we have so much information available out there in the world, and there's a lot of misinformation out there in the world as well. And I think particularly when you look at kind of challenges that you see, like taking the riding school as the example, if you have a riding school that is managed by someone that is very traditional, hasn't really done any CPD or sort of furthered their learning for the past 25 to 30 years, they're running a yard off of things that were correct 30 years ago. Science and technology have massively changed since then, and we know that the way that we did things 30 years ago might not be for the best in the best interest of the horse. In order for that person to continue managing that yard, they kind of have to, or they create a bit of a culture where people don't challenge them. And so it's hard as a young person coming up through that environment and kind of maybe seeing things online that don't quite match up with what they're seeing in real life. It can be really, really confusing. And for me, education is how you empower people to have those conversations, to challenge those structures that have become really, really ingrained. And the way that we improve the welfare and the lived experience of the animal is by empowering the caregivers um, to make better decisions on the basis of information that they've gained. And the only way that you can do that is through effective education.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I totally agree with you. Education is power, as you say, it's empowerment for people. What do you think are the biggest challenges faced by caregivers, horse owners, riders, and so on?
I actually think now there's almost it's almost like information overload that's out there. We have so much information. It's really, really hard to know what your sources are that you can trust. And I think that it's tricky because there's a lot of narratives that you can see spun on places like Facebook that can seem true, but it's just written by someone that's written it with a hell of a lot of confidence. And
Yeah.
there's actually no science or sort of factual basis. It's literally just one person's experience, but that one person has a platform and therefore we listen to them. And I think that as a horse owner, particularly horse owners who maybe aren't the most experienced or this is their first horse that they're kind of they've gotten their first horse as an adult, for example, which I see quite a lot of in massage. These people are just trying to do the right thing for their animal, but there's not a sort of a trusted resource that you can know that you can go to and get good advice from.
Yeah.
And I think that that can potentially be very dangerous in some cases. And that for me is one of the biggest challenges that I see because I can go out to meet a new owner or a new client that I've never met before, and they'll maybe tell me something with a lot of confidence. And I'm just like, wow, that is completely wrong. Like, who taught you that?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a really hard thing to unpack in like a
yeah,
45
yeah,
minute session that I'm maybe having with them.
yeah,
Um, and so, yeah, that's a bit of a long way around to answer your question, but I think misinformation
yeah.
is one of the biggest challenges, particularly in this AI driven world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you can AI anything, you can ask any questions, can't you? But not necessarily get the right answer and not be able to distinguish what's right and what's not.
Yeah,
Um,
I've had a few sort of back and forths, just sort of for my own interest. So my own horse at the moment, I'm in the process of rehabbing her from a DDFT injury, and so I've stuck a few things into Gemini and ChatGPT, and I've asked questions. And if you argue it with it for long enough, it'll just agree with you. On one of the rehab plans that I was asking for it about, they were like, "Yeah, you can jump her again at about the 9 month mark," and I was like, "I absolutely will not be doing that, and how dare you suggest such a thing?"
yeah,
Like it's and the thing is, it spits out what it wants you to hear. So if I came to it saying like, "Oh, I really want to get my horse back at eventing again. She has this injury. How do I go about doing that?" It's going to tell me something, and it's not going to be right.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it can reference things and it can make it look legit, but you still need to have that degree of critical thought in your own brain to be like, that's not necessarily trustworthy.
yeah,
But it's written with a lot of confidence, and that's, I think,
yeah.
where the danger comes in.
Yeah, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I've sometimes put things in ChatGPT or Gemini and just to see what answers it would come up with, and just horrendous, horrendous. You're thinking, oh my
Mhm.
God, that's the worst thing you could do for a horse. So I
But
actually,
someone,
go
but
on,
someone
sorry.
who's someone who's in a vulnerable state of mind about their horse, if that's telling them something positive, they're going to want to believe that what it's
Yeah,
saying is true.
yeah. And it's said so kind, like you say, confidently, usually spews out paragraph
Mhm.
upon paragraph of information and yeah. So let's talk about something where you can put some trust in. Um, so with the Lingfield then, I know you've got exciting developments coming up. So tell us more about that.
Yes, so part of what Paula's family donated to EQUK was probably over 1,000 pages of information about how to take care of horses and about equine nutrition and about horse psychology. And this has been written by qualified individuals who are very, very well educated. It has been written by equine behaviorists, it's been written by equine nutritionists, it's been written by people who know what they're talking about and are up to date with the knowledge that they have. And so what we are in the process of building at the moment is essentially going to be we're developing it into a mobile app, which is going to have some different functionalities to it. But one of them is going to be kind of a trusted place for horse owners to go to access information, is going to be verified by qualified professionals, and it's going to be in sort of easy to digest formats because I think people's attention span these days are terrible. And
Yeah.
so I think the long format Lingfield courses, as valuable as they are, I don't think are really compatible with our modern day brains. And so what we're doing is we're breaking down this really high quality content into digestible, bite-sized learning pieces that that work with your brain chemistry, that are fun to use. We're wanting to kind of have like a sort of almost like a Duolingo style sort of element to it where you kind of get that immediate reward, that progression um, through the reading of the articles and doing the quizzes and the learning. And it's all going to be proper, high qualified, verified information that people can kind of access for their own learning. That this app that we're developing, it's also going to cover some of the other core aspects that EQK does. So it's going to be making educational events more accessible. We're going to have a platform for people who want to share their own sort of like CPD events. If we've got like for example, if you had events for equine physios that are wanting to kind of do their CPD at somewhere that they can kind of find all of those events in one places. It's going to also have events for like coaches, for example, if they're wanting to do stable management courses, they can advertise their courses here. Because what we find as well with from seeing all of the Lingfield stuff over the years, a lot of this stuff just lives in silos on the internet or on
Yeah.
Facebook. And you just have to kind of know where to go looking for things. And it's as a small business trying to organize your event or trying to organize your course, you want to educate people about horses. You don't want to be navigating Meta Business Suite.
Yeah.
So you're trying to create an environment that works for horse people who want to learn, but also equine professionals who want to educate. And we're trying to bring the two together in the one place. So that is what we are in the process of developing at the moment.
I know it's a huge undertaking, and like you said before, you are full time in the equine massage, so this is kind of like
Yeah.
done outside of your working hours. So, what kind of time scale have you put on it?
So we're hoping to have Oh, I think it's realistically probably going to be early next year by the time that we
Yeah,
have pulled this together. If because the thing is, we don't want to rush this. We want to do it right. And a big part of doing it right is making sure the infrastructure that we build is stable, no pun intended, and easy to use, and people like using it because there's no point. The last thing we need is another app that doesn't work very well that you download on your phone and you instantly delete. Like that's not what we're building here. We want to build something that really works and that is really integrated into how the whole horse industry functions. And I think it's about creating something that sort of that slips into that kind of gap that exists. I think the horse industry, the way it exists in my head, it's incredibly fragmented because you've got owners, you've got paraprofessionals, you've got vets, you've got the professionals at the high regions of the yard. You've got loads of different businesses that exist, but nothing sort of integrates all of them together, even though the thing that does bind us together is the common love of the horse, but there's a breakdown that happens in the sharing of information and the sharing of education. And for me, it's in those cracks that you get the welfare concerns that occur.
yeah,
And what we're trying to do is build an infrastructure that kind of brings this all together in a coherent, usable way.
yeah. Absolutely fantastic. I really look forward to seeing that. Where can people find you on socials and the internet so that they can follow the progress and sign up for anything that you've got on at the moment and also watch out for this brand new app?
Yeah, so probably the best place to find us is on the EQK Instagram. That's probably where I'm most active on social media, I would say. And you can also find all of the Lingfield courses on at www.horse-care.co.uk. That's the Lingfield Equine Distance Learning website. And Lingfield Equine Distance Learning has its own Facebook page as well. So between whatever you can pick your poison, whatever is your social media platform of choice, you can find me in one of those places.
Super. I'll put all of that down in the description box so people can click on it and find you and follow you and see what the progress is. Thanks ever so much for chatting to us about that because I think it is such a crucial part of equestrianism that we are not only knowledgeable but we update our knowledge and that we keep current because it moves so fast these days as well.
It does, and I think it's something that we can very easily just take for granted. If something isn't easy to use or isn't accessible, we're just like, oh, I don't actually need to know that. That's probably not important. But
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is to put this in the palm of your hands, so you know you can't turn a blind eye to things that you don't know anymore, because we're going to make sure that it's there for people to have.
Brilliant. Brilliant for the horses and for welfare. Thank you so much, Kat. It's been great to catch up. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me on.